welcome to the Movement Upgraded podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jen Hosler, licensed physical therapist and certified strength and mobility coach. Here you can expect to hear about all things movement. The Movement Upgraded podcast is a blend of the science of strength training, rehab, and mobility, mixed with a personal and professional experience to provide you with the steps you need to keep your body pain-free and moving well, so you can do what you love forever. Welcome, movement nerds. It is the beginning of 2022. Woohoo! I am so excited. This is our first real podcast. So this is super cool. You can't see, but I'm beaming ear to ear because this is something I've just wanted to do for so long. So I chose to kick off this podcast with an episode all about goal setting for obvious reasons. We are at the beginning of a new year, so that magic and energy tends to be helpful for people who are interested in setting new goals or reforming their goals. And also, it's just really great to start out this podcast with setting goals because if you're coming here, you're likely trying to achieve something. You're trying to get better, move better, feel better, whatever it is, and movement is usually the answer to that. That's likely why you're here, and none of that will happen if we don't know the direction we're going and we don't have some consistency and some direction or very specific intention behind what we're doing. So my goal is to take this podcast today and help give you some guidance on setting goals. Whether or not you're listening to this in the new year or you care to take part in the New Year's resolution energy, or if you're on your own timeline. I know personally I didn't really care about New Year's for a very long time, and now that I'm in business for a while, it kind of seems like a natural tendency to just reevaluate at the new year. So regardless, this will apply across the board. So today we're going to cover the three biggest things to keep in mind when setting a goal and creating or reforming habits, because that's essentially what this is all about. So number one, let's just get right to it. Setting a goal means we really need to learn how to zoom out and zoom in accordingly. And in my experience, most of our zoom lenses are completely broken. We tend to either focus on one or the other way too much, and we don't know how to shift towards zooming in and zooming out as necessary. So let's talk about what that means. Zooming out really allows us to get a bigger picture of our priorities or the people that we want to become, the why. So think about this as your big overarching goal or theme towards what you're trying to achieve. And then zooming in really allows us to create the actual habits and look at our day-to-day experiences that will add up and create those changes in the long run. This is the how. Most people, in my experience, do too much of one or the other. When they're setting goals, we'll set resolutions and choose these words or intentions, which is really great for an overarching theme, but they won't zoom in enough to create changes on a daily basis so that at the next year or at your next time point, whatever that looks like for you, they get disappointed because nothing changed over that time point. And that's really frustrating. And this is where people sometimes get into that fixed mindset of, well, it just never works. And zooming out too much often just has us get this big high energy of, yeah, I'm so excited, but it wears off and we never set the systems in place to make sure that that will happen. So it is important to zoom out to know where you're going, because the reverse is also true. So there are some people who will choose habits. So they'll focus on the day-to-day. Maybe they'll choose these habits based off of Instagram because somebody told them they should, or they know these are just things they should do, or they'll see it on Instagram, but they'll forget to zoom out and understand why they're doing those things or what the bigger purpose is. And this will often lead to missing a day or two and just giving up because we lose sight of the bigger picture. So to combat both of these issues, we need to have a good understanding of our why, what things we're interested in pursuing. Like, think big here. What's your overarching reason for wanting to do a thing, or how do you want to feel? You can look over years, like multiple years, over several months. But again, we want to think big. Then we want to funnel it down. So one of my biggest personal goals and a big thing that I try to help other people do is really age well and maintain my physical freedom as long as possible. That means being mobile and strong and physically fit. What that means when broken down is very specific to other goals that I have, but I know my overarching theme when I look at my fitness goals and my movement goals is that I just want to age well. Like, when I'm 80, I still want to be in the gym and I still want to be able to do things on my own. Like, I want to be as physically free. I want to have lots of physical freedom. And so that's kind of my overarching theme. So I want you to understand, like, what is your ultimate goal? It's something that may not necessarily be attainable, right? Like, it's just something that might be this continual long thing. That's okay, right? We're thinking big. It can be as simple for you as like being healthy. It just needs to be something that gets you started, right? It's your kind of like overall motivation that you can tap back into and be like, okay, what was my reason for starting? So that you can remember, this is why I'm doing the thing that I'm doing. And at the end of the year, for example, you can look back and be like, okay, so I was consistent maybe only 30% of the time, but that's 30% more than I was with that thing than it was the previous year. And so that is actually taking me towards my ultimate goal of being healthier. So remember your big main theme. Now, once you've figured that out, we need to move to the how. So that is the zooming in on your day-to-day or week-to-week functions. This is often where we talk about habits and consistency. So we'll get to that. But let's think about that overarching theme and then think, okay, if I want to be this like mobile, strong, independent, healthy person when I'm 85 or 90, that's my example, then what do I need to do now consistently to make sure that happens, right? What kind of a person is strong and mobile when they're 90? It's probably somebody who moves well and takes care of their joints and are regularly engaging in fitness. So I will then start to think about those daily or weekly habits that I need to be consistent with in order to reach the main thing. This is sometimes a bit more tricky than coming up with your overarching theme because we need to have the knowledge of two things. We need to know, one, like, what things do I need to do to achieve that big thing? So again, if we're talking about fitness, you need to have some fitness knowledge on, okay, how do I need to structure things, or what does that actually look like that over decades is going to end up helping me age well? You might not know that knowledge, which is totally fine. This is where hiring a coach can be helpful. The other thing that we need to really understand is, where are we currently? So this is also highly missed when people start to look at new habits and setting goals, is they forget to figure out where they are. They just see where they want to be and see what they know they need to do to get there, and they just jump into things without assessing where they are. And again, this is where hiring a coach can be helpful, because a coach can help you figure out what you need to do to get there, because they have that knowledge. They are an expert in the field, and they are going to be able to look at where you are now to figure out the best next step. Many people, when they start to add a habit to their life, they jump to like the 8th step instead of doing the first, second, or third thing. When it comes to mobility, which is like one of my expertise categories, I guess, this is really common. People will start to be like, okay, what mobility exercises or drills do I need to be doing in my programming? And while that can be helpful, we can start to then save all of these exercises and never do anything, but really they're missing the baseline, which is they just need to do their daily CARs. And if you're listening to this and you're new, CARs stands for Controlled Articular Rotations. They are the taking your joints through their full ranges of motion. It's a movement routine that we can do, or should do, every single day. It's essentially like the brushing and flossing of your teeth. So I talk about this a lot. I have a lot of information on my Instagram. And if you followed any of my work, you'll know that. But it's how we maintain the health of our joints, right? We can't start doing all of these crazy complicated movements if we are not working to maintain where we are on a regular basis and don't really have any idea on how to control our bodies, which is what CARS helps us learn. So we have to start with first things first, right? So that is something to to consider for you as you are kind of setting goals and looking into maybe creating new habits or reforming your old ones is, again, we'll go back through this. Make sure you have a big overarching understanding of what your theme is, what you're really trying to move towards. So like a direction, we want like this arrow to be shifted in the right direction. And then we want the small little baby steps. So those stepping stones need to be in place, and we need to make sure we're starting at the right one. We have to really understand, again, what's ideal. So what it's going to take to get there. And then we really need to understand where we are now. And the reason that we need to start where we are, like I said earlier, is that one, it's really important to make sure that something we're doing is realistic, because if it's not, and it's this huge jump and it's this big new step we're taking, we're not going to be consistent with it. And if we're not going to be consistent with it, then what's the point? Because our big overarching theme should be something that takes a really long time to work towards, which means it's got to be something that's like sustainable. So our habit has to be sustainable, it has to be realistic, and it's got to be a small jump. The bigger the jump is in like a habit, the more hard or difficult or barriers there are to achieving it, the less likely it is to be sustainable. The other thing to think about when it comes to sustainability, especially when it comes to movement, is big acute spikes in movement. So let's say maybe your overarching goal is to be healthier, right? Or feel better and feel good as you age, like age well, like I said. Maybe one of the things you're going to look at is increasing your daily steps. And we know that steps, 7,000 to 8,000 steps is when our significant decrease for chronic diseases is met. And you're currently now at 1,000 steps per day. If you set a goal to all of a sudden start walking 8,000 steps per day, there are a couple things that are going to happen. One, you're going to get burned out very quickly because now this is a huge change. You were probably not taking any walks on a regular basis, and now all of a sudden you're having to walk 2 or 3 times a day for like an hour. That is a big change, and the bigger your change in your life, the less likely you are to stay consistent with it. The second thing is this is now a big spike in load for your body. I'm a physical therapist. We're going to talk a lot about injuries on here, and if you have a huge spike in load, you're going to be at an increased risk for injury or pain. Every time you take a step, your body has to absorb some of the ground reaction force, and you don't need to know what all of that means, except your feet and your knees and your hips and your back are all having load on them when you're walking. It's very minimal, but 1,000 steps is very different load on your body than 8,000 steps. And if you suddenly go from 1,000 to 8,000 every single day, so that is 7,000 versus 56,000 per week, which I'm very proud of myself for doing that math right now. Math is not my forte. That's a pretty big spike. And if you look at load over a week, you don't want something that's super significant, especially if you are like somebody who is more sedentary or haven't been lifting and exercising and training a lot in your life. And the older we get and the less trained we are, the more important this becomes. So it's unsustainable because it's a big jump and you're less likely to be consistent with it based on just like normal life consistency and barriers. But 2, you're more likely to get injured and that or be experiencing pain, and that's not good. Like your feet are probably not going to feel good if you jump that quickly, and you're going to be more likely to have something develop like plantar fasciitis. This is why all of a sudden deciding that you're going to run out of nowhere is not good and increases your risk for injuries. It's not that running is bad for you, but it's a big spike in your load. So hopefully that makes sense, but instead, maybe you would want to aim for 1,500 steps daily on average to start. And when you progress, that really depends on like a few main things. One would be when it becomes easy. So when you are no longer having to kind of like drag yourself out and it's like this like big barrier, then you're probably way more consistent with it and you're like, okay, I can do this, and it feels more natural, right? Like second nature. That's when you're probably ready to progress. And other things to consider is your feet aren't sore from it and you're feeling like it's relatively easy on your body. Those are both important things to keep into consideration. So maybe for some people this will be after like 2 weeks because they're like, that was pretty easy, but maybe it's not till after 3 months. But it's really important to make sure that we're picking like habits that feel easier so we can create success and momentum. I'm really big into that. So don't be overzealous, even though when we set goals, we're like really excited and it's like new and fresh and we're like, I'm going to do this. If that's you, by the way, it's okay if that happens because with experience, you'll begin to know what's too much for you and not. So just keep that in mind. I'll throw some little mindset things, but you're not going to know exactly where you should be and how much is too much sometimes until you start to do this consistently. It's all a learning process. And if we keep in mind that the goal isn't success or failure, it's just learning, which is like so cliche to say, but it's really important to understand. Goals are not supposed to be this like moral thing for you to have an idea of, if I don't accomplish this at this time, then I failed. Like that's not the point of a goal. A goal is to give you direction, is to have an arrow pointing in the right direction and then give you information that you can utilize in the future. That's really the whole thing. So let's talk about number 2. So the second thing that we need to keep in mind. So once we kind of have set our goal, we've got the direction down, we've got like a habit understood of what we need to do to get to where we want to go. We actually got to do the thing. Who knew, right? So how annoying, we actually have to put in the work, but that is what we have to do. And so if you're somebody who loves to plan but does not take action, then let's talk about making sure that we take action and doing the part. It's not just that you need to take action, because I'm sure a majority of people listening to this are like, yeah, I mean, I do take action. I've done it before, but then I always fall off. Like that whole idea of falling off the wagon. First of all, there's no wagon. You're not falling off the wagon. You are just having life things happen. And we're going to talk about that. But really, it comes down to making sure you can stay consistent. And I want to talk about how to make sure that we are setting ourselves up for success. And surprise, surprise, because I love talking about this stuff, the first thing to keep in mind is mindset. Like understanding and having a good mindset to start. Number 1, we need to remember that you're going to miss days. Like you're going to miss days. Like it's not a failure. You're just going to miss or not reach the ultimate goal. And you have to expect that. And we have to know that we're going to experience that, right? So if you can understand that you're going to experience that and kind of see that in your head, not that you're going to like see this whole thing unravel, right? But I just want you to know you're going to miss days. Like we set things up and we expect perfection and it's just unrealistic. And that's never how it works. And if you ever met anybody who's successful in the thing that you want to do, they will tell you that we regularly meet our goals as according to the timelines of what we set. Like that's okay. So you're going to miss days. Life's going to throw random shit at you. You're going to feel like a ton of resistance, and sometimes you're going to give into the resistance, and sometimes you're going to learn about, okay, I can't, or I struggle during this circumstance, and you're just going to learn about things. It's just really important to make sure that we're not making those times more of a thing than what they already are. If and when you miss a day of cars, for example, just do your best to not get emotional and go down a shame and fuck it spiral. What that really looks like is beating yourself up and thinking I should have done this and I'm so mad at myself that I haven't done this and screw it, I already missed today. I may as well just give up the rest of the week and I'll start again on Monday. We're not starting again. We're not giving up. It's just literally, I didn't do this day, I'm moving on. Or I didn't do 3 days, I'm moving on. Today I'm doing it. Or today I'm going to do half of it because I feel a big resistance. It doesn't matter. Just don't make it more of a thing. Just do it, right? We're going to move on. Your goal is to miss as little times after as the first time you miss. So if you miss a day, don't let it turn into like 3 or 4 days. Just do your best to make it as little of a thing as possible. The less emotion we have, the more clinical we can get, and the more we can understand why things happen, and the more that we can set ourselves up for success in the future. So just remember it's going to happen, and the best thing you can do is just persevere. Just keep going. Second, I am totally going to steal ideas from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. I am a big proponent of his work, but I'm going to give him credit when I do, because I believe in giving credit where it's due. You never steal bad ideas, right? So the second thing I want you to keep in mind when it's talking about like actually doing the thing and staying consistent is that we just need to make sure that we're setting up like the actual habit in a way that we can be consistent with it. And there are some things that I'm going to cover right now that are just like small little things to keep in mind. You don't need to take every single one of these and do them, but they're hopefully going to help you spark some ideas. Maybe make sure you have like a notepad around so you can write them down if you're into that, or just listen attentively and think, okay, yeah, I can totally take this habit that I want to do and apply this information to it, right? So how you choose your task will definitely impact how consistent you are with it. Number one, we want to make sure we are making it easy. I said this earlier, but we're lazy creatures. We have been programmed or programming. We're not in the matrix, so that's not the right word, but we have adapted to basically minimize how much energy expenditure we have on a day-to-day basis. So you're not lazy because you're lazy and you're like this non-moral, like, I don't know. There's no morality attached. There is actually just science. We are supposed to be lazy because we want to conserve energy as much as possible, because primarily, like back in the day when we didn't have a lot of food available, we wanted to conserve energy just in case. So we still have a lot of that wiring. So don't overcomplicate something. Try to just start with the bare minimum and be consistent with that, and do a little bit less than you think you should or than you can, because if you set your goal, you can always bump it up once you've achieved success. And it's much more likely that you're going to stay consistent if you are being successful than if you were to set the ball too high and then you're not successful. So totally okay to lower the barrier by just making your goal a little less intense than you think it needs to be. Like, no ego here. Number two, make it obvious. Like, make it something or set up something in a way that like you can't not think about the habit you want to do. So if you want to go for walks more consistently, leave your shoes by the door so that when you walk past your door, you see them. Or make sure that your gym bag is like in your car so that it's obvious when you get in your car, you see your gym bag and you're like, oh, I have to go to the gym. Like, make it this obvious thing so that it's lower barrier and you just are going to be reminded consistently to do it. Number three, I think we're on, is make it attractive. So this is really important because I was like, I didn't know that I could make something like movement or work in it. Like, fitness is work. Let's not just pretend it's not. I didn't know that we could make it attractive and fun. I just assumed, like, if it's not fun, if it's not something I'm like naturally wanting to do, it shouldn't be fun. And that's so not true. So ways that you can make things attractive. Let's talk about, maybe you want to do daily cars. Get yourself a cute little yoga mat, create a little space in the corner, get your light candles, or have it there so it's obvious, which is tackling what we just talked about. And now it's also attractive, right? You have like this cute yoga mat that's like there. There's a lower barrier because it's already there. You don't have to set anything up, and it's cute, so it's more attractive. So that's number four. Number three, we're going on to number four. Told you math is not my strength. Number four is make it satisfying. So I don't know what this means for you. It's going to mean something different for everybody, but some things are naturally satisfying in and of themselves. Like cars just feels good after you feel more relaxed. You like feel that you did something. Sometimes it's not that way for some people, and you have to do them pretty consistently before you get to feel good. So for you, you have to know, like maybe you like seeing check marks. Like there's something like some dopamine hit for you when you check something off or cross it off the list. So get a cute little habit tracker. They have like tons of apps, or like you can print things out. I've had clients put together their own list and they will check off their cars and their mobility work. So just do what you need to make it satisfying though, like so that you get a little dopamine hit. It's okay to have a dopamine hit when you finish. Like we want to reinforce that. The last thing is habit stack. This is something that has been more popular lately, but habit stacking just means you are taking a new habit that you're trying to work on and you're pairing it with an old habit that you don't have to think about. Something you're doing naturally that literally takes zero effort. You do it no matter what. Maybe because you have to, maybe because you like to, whatever. I'll give you an example. Last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago now, I can't remember, but I started and did an Instagram live and started talking about the idea of coffee in cars. Coffee is something almost everybody I know wakes up with and has a cup of when they are awake. So I was like, hey, let's habit stack your cars, your daily cars routine with your coffee, whether that's I'm going to do my cars first and then I'm going to reward myself with coffee because you want to make it satisfying or attractive for yourself. Or maybe you want to do your coffee first, and as soon as your cup is down, you do your cars because that is how you're habit stacking and you're just making it obvious. You're moving right into the next thing. Whatever it is, I started coffee and cars and I used the hashtag and we started doing that so that you could get your cars done early in the morning and not have to think about them the rest of the day, because whether or not you like it, throughout the day, your energy is going away. You are using willpower, you are using your energy, and by the end of the day, you just don't have a lot left. And so if something's really important to you, it's better to do it in the forefront of your day or before you have like a really demanding task so that you can put your energy into the things that are important, because you have to put energy into work and other things that is just part of being human. So habit stacking is phenomenal and can be a great way. It's just be really specific when you're doing it. So if you're like, I'm going to go for a walk when I get home from work, make sure you're really specific about that. And you're like, not going to go for a walk. You're not going to come home from work and then sit down and then go do all of these things. And then you have to like get back up and go for a walk. Make sure you're thinking about like your day to day. Like I come home from work personally, and if I sit on the couch, I'm not getting back up. Like I'm just not going to do it. It's going to take way more willpower. So instead I get home from work, I change into comfortable clothes. Personally, I am always in comfortable clothes because that's how I am now. But when I was younger, I used to have to wear business casual. Younger as in 4 years ago, like back in the day. It feels like eons ago sometimes, but I would have to wear business casual. And so I loved going for walks when I got home. It was a way for me to connect with Ryan and be outside because I hated being inside all day. And so that's what we would do. Before I would sit on the couch, I would change into comfy clothes. I would put on my gym shoes and we would go. So I would habit stack like that whole like coming home transition with going for a walk, but I had to make sure it was at the right time. And so I was really specific about my habit. It was before I would sit on the couch. So as soon as I got home, I changed into comfortable clothes, and as long as those were on, I pretty much always went for a walk. So it became something I didn't think about. So keep in mind that think about your day to day when you are setting new goals. It's really, really important. So third, let's move into the third thing to keep in mind. We're almost done with this podcast. I'm so if you're still listening, that's awesome. So hopefully this is like super helpful for you. But let's talk about the third thing, which is consistency, right? So we talked about how to be consistent with making sure that the way we're setting it up is conducive to sustainability. So that was what we just covered. But let's talk about if we're skipping or we're just not being consistent, right? That happens more oftentimes than we would like it to happen. I know that was something that was hard for me, and a lot of the reason for me that was happening is because of the first two things that I mentioned today in this podcast. So if you are listening to this podcast and you've accomplished the first two things pretty well, but you're still being really inconsistent, this is what we're going to talk about right now, which is reevaluate. So again, we have to do this objectively, like all caps objectively, like really be as less, not as emotionless, but like let's not use emotion. So let's move through the emotions. You can feel them, but acknowledge where they're coming from, right? So if you're feeling a lot of shame, do some digging, like unpacking. Where's that coming from? It's likely not you. It's something you were taught or something you learned, something that was portrayed to you, or something you constantly see in the fitness world, because fitness and shame, unfortunately, go hand in hand in a lot of places, except not here. So if that's you, unpack those emotions, where they're coming from, figure out what they are, do your best to work through them and remove them. Let's look at things objectively. So here are some questions I want you to think about. Number one, did you set an unrealistic goal for yourself? So Was it just unrealistic? Like, is this a right time in your life to try to pursue this thing? Or was the goal just too lofty? Like, that's okay. Sometimes we aren't good at understanding where we are and what we can accomplish. And I've been in business for 4 years, and I like the parallels between health and business because they're really consistent. There's just a lot of good parallels. But I would set like all these goals, but I had no experience to base my goals off of. So it was just kind of like a shot in the dark. And at first, it's very much like that. So it's okay if your health and fitness goals are very unrealistic at first and you just don't know because you don't have the experience. And if you're not hiring somebody who has experience and knowledge, you're going to have to gain experience and knowledge through your own. So it's okay. Number 2, is this not a good time in your life to pursue the thing you want? So I kind of said that in number 1, but like sometimes our lives are just pretty full. So let's talk. I'm trying to think of an example. Maybe your goal is to get jacked, right? Like you just want to put on as much muscle as possible. Currently, you're lifting twice a week in the gym and you're consistent with that. To get really strong, put on like a ton of muscle, it takes a ton of work and it takes pretty consistent nutrition, making sure you're eating enough protein particularly. If you are also in the middle of shifting jobs, moving places, a divorce, going through a loss, heck, even if you're in the middle of a pandemic like we are, and you start to set these goals of working out 4 to 5 days a week and you just find yourself like not doing it, you are reverting back to 2 times a week, maybe 3 times a week, maybe it's just not a good time to pursue getting jacked. Maybe you're consistent with like 3 times a week, but anything above that is just not happening. Like maybe one week you get like 4 days and you're like, that's awesome. Or the first week you got 5 days and it never happened again. Maybe it's not a good time to pursue getting jacked. Maybe you can set yourself up though in the future for getting jacked and working out 5 days a week by just working out 3 days instead of 2. And I mean working out as in like lifting is what we're talking about for that goal. So that's just one example, but like it's okay if your life is not conducive for the thing that you want. And I know in fitness, even in general in the health and wellness industry, we love to shame people and talk about how we all have 24 hours, the same 24 hours in the day, but we really don't. And some of us have more on our plates than others. And it's okay to acknowledge that and acknowledge that maybe it's not the right time to pursue the thing that you originally thought you wanted. And it's okay to feel like disappointed in that too. So maybe that's what we need to consider. Number 3, can you adjust so the habit you're doing to a different time? Like maybe the way that you're approaching it is just like not consistent. So maybe your workouts shouldn't be in the morning at 5 a.m. like you thought they were because it's just destroying your sleep and then you're cranky and then you're falling asleep early, you're not doing anything else. Or maybe you're just skipping more often than not and snoozing. I cannot work out in the morning. I never was consistent with it. I used to beat myself up about it. And then I was like, I'm just not a morning person and I don't enjoy it. Like everything was against me and I just recognize that maybe that's not for me and I let it go and then we shifted. Like it's way easier to move on from something and be like clinical and objective once you just get over the fact that like it doesn't have to mean anything more than what it is, right? We don't have to attach meaning and tell stories about why we aren't morning people. It just maybe we need to acknowledge that we're not morning people or morning workout people. They're a different breed anyways. If you're a morning workout person, awesome for you. And I'll never understand. Kind of kidding. Anyways, the last thing I want you to think about, or a last reflective question for you if you're not consistent, is can you reduce the barrier to complete this task or habit? So can we make it a little bit easier? Like what is the resistance? What do you feel? Like is, again, the actual goal. So let's say your goal was, I'm going to do my 5 cars per joint every single day. And you find yourself not doing them at all consistently. Can we reduce the barrier a little bit and maybe just do 1 car at each joint per day and allow that to be the check mark? Some days you might do more and you might end up on more days than not doing 5 cars per joint. But if you allow yourself to only do 1, you might get them done every single day instead of at the end of the week having 2 days where you did cars and you did 5 per joint and it was perfect. Instead of only 2 days doing your cars and the rest of the 5 not, then maybe we end up doing 1 car per every joint for the other 5 days, and 2 days we do 5 cars per joint. That's actually a lot more cars at the end of the week. Like, that's a win, right? So just think about how you can reduce the barrier. Another thing that I love to do when it comes to lifting, I am way privileged now in the ability that I have a gym in my garage. Like, that was really important for me when we moved last year. And so one of the ways that I reduce the barrier for my workouts is I'll commit to sometimes less. Like, I'll just say I'm going to do less volume. I'll do 2 sets instead of 4, or I just won't change my clothes. Like, I just will say I'm going to literally go out there in whatever I'm wearing and get done whatever it is. So sometimes you have to lower the barrier and allow yourself to do something and not let it be perfect. So something is always better than nothing. Not always, but more often it is. So those are the things I want you to consider. Those are my best reflection questions if you find yourself not being consistent. Obviously, if you're just now setting a goal, you're just going to keep those questions somewhere that you can reflect on later. But if you are not setting a goal and you're just working on consistency right now, this is something for you to think of. I work on this a lot with people because it turns out half of my job as a physical therapist specifically is not the programming and finding the right exercises. That is part of my job. But the other part of my job is actually how can I help you be more consistent with the exercises that I need you to do? Because it's work and habits, and that is really how we get out of pain and feel better. And that's why this podcast is number 1, right? So something I work on a lot with people is going through these reflection questions, and we do all kinds of things like break up cars, and we do them throughout the day instead of having a full routine, or we do less of them instead of all of them, or I help them find when we can habit stack, and we do all of that stuff. So sometimes it helps to have somebody in your corner helping you, guide you through that. It can always help if you're struggling on your own. Okay, so I think that is plenty for now. Hopefully you can get some golden nuggets out of that. I could probably ramble on about habits forever. It's something that I never knew again would be so important in my career because we did not talk about it in PT school, much to my dismay. Barely talked about it even in exercise science. There's just so much that you can cover in a curriculum, and that's understandable, but it's just so important. So it's not even just for myself, but for those I work with. This is definitely stuff I've gone through myself, but really important for everybody I work with. So it's just interesting how much getting out of pain had to do with habits, just like getting strong or getting healthy. And I never knew that, but it's a lot of what it is. So if you didn't know that, welcome to this new knowledge. Hope you learned some things. Don't forget to leave the podcast a review if you did, and if you learned some stuff, and share with somebody who may need to learn these things or would benefit from this information. I will be so thankful for you if you do either of those things. I am so thankful for you. Happy belated New Year. And we are going to go a little bit more in depth into this in episode number 2. We're going to talk specifically about movement. So movement goals, moving better and moving more. So how to apply this information to movement. I did a little bit of that here and there throughout, but we're going to get a little bit deeper into it in the next podcast. So I will see you then.